Hey, in this video, I'm going to show you how to get set up with the Twitter API. So this not only works for Twitter, but for any OAuth 1.0a API. Before I get started, I want to cover real quick why OAuth. So for the first time with this API, we're going to want to do things on behalf of a particular user. So for example, in here, I might want to create a tweet for them. So because of that, I need their permission. One way to do it is I can get their username and password, but that's not really that great for a user. They don't want to have to give out their username and password. So the way that OAuth works is a lot like the way that it might work if you have a house sitter for your house. And so you give them kind of a temporary security code for your alarm system. And then when you're back from vacation, you can expire their access. So you've probably seen OAuth before. It looks like this. You have in your app a button like login with Twitter or login with Facebook. I tap on it and it actually takes me out of my app and it brings me to mobile Safari. It actually takes me to twitter.com. So twitter.com says, hey, this app wants to have certain permissions. So you can see here that they not only want to read tweets, but be able to update your profile, post tweets on your behalf. And so you can look at this app and say, okay, well, I'll choose to trust this app. So I'm going to click Authorize App. So Authorize App is going to generate that kind of guest key. It's called an access token. And that access token is basically like your password. It gives you the same permissions. The only difference is if you don't like the way that app is behaving or it's doing some sketchy things, and you can expire that access token. So I'm going to click open, and that's going to switch me back into the application, except now it's actually handed that access token over to my app. And so if I switch over to Xcode, I can see that once I switched back, I went ahead and I queried for the tweets, and I printed them out here. So I'm going to show you how to get set up with this process. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to the Twitter website. So every API is going to have some kind of application management portal. So I went to apps.twitter.com and I'm going to create a new app. So I'll enter in just some fake stuff here. So CodePath, Twitter demo app, and then this any kind of description here. This is a demo of a Twitter app. And then you do need to enter in a website. This can be any website. I'm just going to point it to CodePath. So this is important here. For this callback URL, you can't leave it blank, or if you leave it blank, it's going to cause issues later. So definitely just copy whatever website you have here and put it into the callback URL. I'm going to scroll down, agree to the developer agreement, and then create my new app. So let's see. This says it's already taken, so I'll just say 456. Okay, so here's my basic app. I have the information. I have a bunch of URLs here that I'm going to look at later. And then if I look at my settings, I want to make sure that this is checked, allow this user to be used for Twitter. And then I'll take a look at my permissions. And so I'm going to note that this has read and write. This app is going to request read and write permissions from the user. So now that I've created the app, I'm ready to go. So I'm going to create a new Xcode project. I'm just going to call this Twitter demo. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to close this right away because I need to create a pod file. So I just add that to my desktop. So if I go to Twitter demo here, then I have my basic Xcode project. I'm going to type in pod in it, and that's just going to, all that does is really create a very blank pod file. I'm going to hit open dot. In order to open this in Finder, I'm going to drag this into Xcode. So you can use any editor except for TextEdit, which is unfortunately the default system one. So I'm going to uncomment use frameworks because we are going to be potentially using SwiftPod, so I do want to use frameworks. And then I'm going to add two libraries. So I'm going to add pod AF networking, and then I'm going to add pod BDB OAuth one manager. And you don't normally have to do this for pods, but I'm going to go ahead and specify a version number here. These are actually the latest versions of these libraries, but that way if these libraries change in the future, like this sample code will definitely work for these two versions. So now that I've done this, I'm going to close this file and then type pod install in order to set up my pods for the first time. So that's going to create my workspace and then download these pods. So now I'll open up the workspace file and let's go ahead and create that Twitter button. So I'm going to change this view controller to be my login view controller. Let me just change this down to like an iPhone size so it's a little bit easier to understand here. And then I'm going to throw in here a login button. So I'm going to change the background color to something Twitter-like, just for fun. And then make this font say login with Twitter. So I'm going to create a new view controller called a login view controller. UI view controller. And then all I need for this is an action for that login button. So I'm going to go ahead and create that now. So on login button. Okay. So login view controller, I'm going to import my BDB OAuth 1 manager. The first time you do this with CocoaPods, you often get this error. Once it finishes building the pod, it'll kind of resolve itself. So now that so I'm in the wrong file here. Let me just change here the default view controller to the login view controller. And let me make that connection one more time. So here, I'm going to create an action on login button. And then here's where I'm going to do all my stuff. Okay, so I'm going to create a Twitter client. And that's going to be of type BDB OAuth 1 session manager. And let's take a look at the available constructors. So I'm going to select this first one. All APIs have some base URL. That just means the front part of the URL. So NSURL, in this case, it's just going to be https api.twitter.com. So just a little convenience they have for you. It's just going to prepend this URL in front of all your endpoints. And so now it's asking for two things, a consumer key and a consumer secret. So in order to get that, I'm going to switch back to Chrome, and I'm going to switch back to this details page and grab those two things. So my my two keys are the consumer key. So I'm going to copy that over here. And then I'm going to copy in my consumer secret. So when I click login, you want to open Mobile Safari to that authorized app. But if you think about it, you can't just go directly to that URL. And the reason why is, imagine if you could, well, that means that anybody could present that page to a user and claim that they were me, the app creator, right? And so we have to prove to Twitter that, hey, we are actually that app. And the way that we do that is we fetch something called a request token. So if I say Twitter client.fetch request token, so this is a generic OAuth 1 process. And so therefore I need to fill in this request path. In order to get that, I'm going to switch back to Twitter. often the URLs are very similar for other OAuth, but like they might have like slight variations. So here I can see that I have my base URL here, and to get the request token, I use this relative URL. So OAuth request token. So I'm gonna paste that in here. I look at the method. So the method is gonna be just get. And then I'm going to leave this callback URL blank for now. We're going to need it later. Scope is a permissions thing. Often there's rarely permissions associated with the request token. And then I have my 2 callbacks here. So these are little blocks of code that are going to get run if in the event of a success. So in the event of a success, they're going to pass back my request token. So I'll type that in there. And then in the event of some failure, there's going to be some error. So it's a good habit just to print an error out here, just in case you do get one. And I'll just say error.localized description. So if this succeeds, I should get my request token. So I'll say I got a token. Yay. Now, there's a little kind of bug in the BDB OAuth 1 manager where it can get kind of flaky if you don't log out first. So I'm going to type in the thing that is for logging out. So I think it's called deauthorize. So that kind of clears the keychain of any previous sessions that you might have had. So let's try this out. So what I'm expecting to see is when I tap the login button, I want to see I got a token. So if I click login with Twitter, I got a token. So remember, the purpose of this token was just to get permissions to send that user to that authorized URL, which is that screen the user sees. So the authorized URL is this thing right here. So I'm going to create a URL, NSURL string, and then this authorized URL. Unpack it here or unwrap it, and then I'm going to use something called UI application shared application.open URL. So this is just a method that anyone can call. You all have seen it before. If you click on a link, let's say that you have a tweet and the tweet links to some article, right? And you want to open that in Mobile Safari, then you would use open URL here. So you can also use this open URL to open up maps, open up the contacts app. So it's just to switch out of your application into something else. So if it's HTTP, then it's going to open in Mobile Safari. So I'm going to type in URL here, and if I did this right, that should open up Mobile Safari. So I'm going to tap login with Twitter, and I see that it switches here, but it says, hey, wait a second, I don't know who you are, so I'm going to present this like error message. So if you look at this, there's really nothing that identifies my demo app. So if I go to the documentation for this authorized endpoint, I see that it requires that OAuth token, which identifies me or this app. So it wants this request token right here. So I'll add it as a query parameter. So query parameters go question mark. It was called OAuth underscore token. OAuth underscore token is equal to, and then request token dot token. So now if I hit login with Twitter, I send them to the URL, and it realizes that I'm this CodePath Twitter demo app 456, and I can then click authorize. So let's see where it goes when I click authorize. It's going to try to redirect me, but you see it redirects me to codepath.com. That's not quite what I want. I want it to go back to my app. Well, CodePath is a website, so it starts with HTTP. So how do I get it to open up my particular app? And the way it works is the same way it works on your computer. Like your computer understands that for a .txt file, it's going to open in your text editor, or for a PNG file, it's going to open up Preview, or for another extension is going to open the appropriate app. So there's a concept of registering extensions. So in this callback URL, that's essentially what we want to do. I'm going to say NSURL, and I'm going to just create an arbitrary extension. So let's call it Twitter demo. And then I'm going to say OAuth. So the OAuth part here is arbitrary. That's just for me to look at later. But this is the key part. This thing is going to trigger the system to say, hey, look for things that understand Twitter demo. In the same way that it might have said, hey, look for things that understand HTTP. It's going to open up mobile Safari. So let's kind of see the changed behavior once I do that. So if I hit login with Twitter and then authorize app again, turns out it doesn't know what Twitter demo is. So remember I said this was kind of a random string, right? So I'm going to grab this Twitter demo, and I'm going to come to my application, and I want to tell the system, I'm going to click on info here, and I want to tell the system, hey, I know how to handle things of type Twitter demo. So if I go back to general, I see that my bundle identifier is com.codepath.twitterdemo. So therefore, I'm going to go back to my info, and then when I create a new URL type, I'm going to retype that bundle identifier, com.codepath.twitterdemo. And then I'm going to, in the URL scheme, paste this Twitter demo thing here. So what this is saying when my app runs is it's going to tell the phone, hey, if anyone ever tries to open something called Twitter demo, I can handle URLs of that type. So go ahead and open me as an application. So let's run it again and see if we successfully switch back to our application. So I'm going to log in with Twitter and then tap authorize, and then that still doesn't work. So let's see here. So I think I was doing a demo earlier, and so that other app is conflicting with this. So I'm gonna just change this arbitrary scheme. I'm gonna change this to my Twitter demo, and then go back and go to this different URL here. So I'm gonna switch to my Twitter demo and run that again. So if I tap login with Twitter and then authorize app, then it's now prompting me to switch back to Twitter demo. So I tap open and it switches back to my application. Okay, so now that I'm back, I'm almost there. I have just one final step. I need to get that access token. So that access token it's that final token. It's the one that's exactly like their password, and that's the magic thing here. So I need to go back to app delegate, because when an application switches into you via a link like that, there's a special function that's called application open URL, and so it hands you back this URL that has the my Twitter demo ://OAuth. So for example, I could print out here my URL. We'll see what that does. So this thing expects you to return a Boolean, so I'm going to return true. So log in with Twitter, and then authorize app, and then open it, and then I'm going to get back this my Twitter demo ://OAuth, and then I get this special kind of code back, this OAuth token. So in this class, import BDB OAuth wine manager, and then I'm going to create I want this token in a variable. So I'm going to say this is my request token, and then put it in a BDB OAuth credential, and create that using a query string. That's what this thing is called here. So I'm going to say url.query. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my login controller and then copy and paste this Twitter client part here into my app delegate. So I have the Twitter client, I have the request token. Now I say Twitter client dot fetch access token. So again, it's going to ask me for a bunch of stuff. I'm going to go back to Chrome, look for the URL for the access token, which is this OAuth/access_token. And I'm going to copy it into the access path here. The method here, if I look at this, I happen to know that it's a post, right? So the post is written here in the documentation. So I'm going to type in post here. The request token is that token I created above. So I'm going to say request token. This is the one that's based off the query string. And then if this is successful, then it's going to hand me back the access token. So I'm going to print out and then in case there's an error, let's go ahead and print that out too. So once I get an access token, I can then make any API call that I want. It's going to be on behalf of that user. So while that's loading, let's go ahead and see all the APIs that I have available. So the one that probably makes the most sense is the home timeline. So I'm definitely interested in that. There's also another interesting one called verify credentials. It's kind of an odd sounding endpoint, but it's, believe it or not, it's the only one that you can call to get like who the current user is, who the logged in user is. So here's the resource URL. It's at this location. This is the base URL, and I'm gonna copy this location. So let's see if I came back yet. This thing crashed. I'm gonna just restart it. And then while that's going, I'll go ahead and pretend like I have the access token. So I can say Twitter client dot get and then give it the particular endpoint that I want. So verify credentials will give me back my current account. Parameters nil. Progress, I don't care about the progress. And then what I do care about is the actual success and then failure. So clean this up a little bit. And then this is the task. You almost never use that. Here's the actual response that came back. That's the useful thing. It's going to be an array or a dictionary. And then the task and the error. So I'm going to go ahead and print out here my account. So let's see if the simulator came back. Log in with Twitter. Forgot my credentials. So go ahead and click authorize app, and got the token. Okay. So now I'm going to run this again because I added this code to actually get my account. Log in with Twitter, and then authorize app, and hopefully I should see a bunch of information about my current account. So my current account, believe it or not, it's gigantic, right? It's a huge dictionary, but it's actually just a single user. So here are all the keys. You can see that my name is here, and so I use it like a dictionary. I'll say let user is equal to response as NS dictionary, and then I can print user, and the key here is just whatever key you want here. So as a kind of a last proof, I'm just going to do one more endpoint. I'll just do the actual tweet. So here you can see my name. So I'm going to do another call, Twitter client .get, and then look at my endpoints here. So I'll just kind of go shopping around, see all the cool stuff. Home timeline, that seems pretty interesting. And then I'll copy this resource area and then paste that in there. No parameters, although in this case, for example, there's a bunch of parameters I can put in: count, since ID, max ID, some other kind of features. So if I did care about any of this, which I don't, then I would put those parameters as a dictionary there. Progress, I never care about that. And then finally, though, I will have my tweets back in this response, which I can then print out here. So I'll say tweets is equal to response as an array of NS dictionaries, because there's a bunch of tweets back. And then let me just iterate through those and print out those tweets. So in tweets, print tweet, oops, okay, and then the failure, I'll put an error here as well as the task. Okay, cool. Run this again, and then hopefully I should see a whole bunch of tweets printed out. Log in with Twitter. Authorize app. And then a bunch of tweets. So that's the basic setup. Now, I did this in the most vanilla way possible just to illustrate the bare minimum, but there's a lot of things I don't like about this. First of all, if you look at this, it looks like kind of a crazy mess, right? And if you kind of squint your eyes, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you have to remember here. There's another aspect where you see this line of code right here where I have the consumer key and consumer secret. I have to copy it in two places, everywhere where I want to use that client. This looks crazy, and then I have to remember these exact URLs and type them in, and then when I get the response back, then in this case I just plucked out the name and the text, but what if I want to quickly access the many other properties of a tweet? I'll have to kind of laboriously go through that. So in the next video, I'm going to show you guys how to take this basic implementation and clean it up so that it's a little bit easier to work with and it's a little bit easier to reuse across all of your applications.